As we head into the holidays, CIG has all hands on deck, working on Star Citizen Alpha 4.0. Of course, the biggest part of the patch is the brand new pyro system and server meshing, but under the radar, CIG has been making plenty of changes to factors of the game like economy, quality of life, and most recently, missiles, torpedoes, and insurance. Hello folks, Space Tech here, and welcome to a short discussion about the state of torpedoes in Star Citizen, their role in the verse, the Polaris, the insane new prices, and CIG's decisions when it comes to including them when you claim a ship. If you found this content interesting, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments down below. So the Polaris. Its introduction marked one of the largest changes to the ship sandbox that we've had in a long time. Of course, part of that is the guns and the large hangar, but we've had that on ships like the Hammerhead and the 890 Jump before. What we hadn't seen before was the Polaris' main party trick, the size 10 torpedoes. Bringing 750,000 damage each, we have never seen this level of destruction possible before this ship. The closest we had before this was the size 9 torpedo at 425,000 instead. Unfortunately, with that being the case, we ran into the completely expected issue of balance. Think to any FPS game you've played in the last decade that had shotguns or snipers. Either they are insanely overpowered with the ability to delete people at any range, or they're just completely worthless, being an objectively bad choice over other weapon types. What makes these weapons hard to balance is the exact same thing that makes torpedoes hard to balance: counterplay. With the ability to destroy a C2, Hull C, Carrack, or any other ship in the verse many times over with a single torpedo, how on earth do you make this feel fair to the person being torpedoed? Well, we generally have two options when being fired upon: shoot down the torp or use your flares. Unfortunately, these methods have a long history in Star Citizen of being too effective or not nearly effective enough. Even when the biggest torpedoes were size 9s, we would see constant complaints of the Eclipse being too strong in one patch and then next to worthless in the next. Luckily for the Polaris, it still provides a lot of value and utility outside of the torpedoes, but this balance issue is still concerning, and the news doesn't get any better for it. The most recent patch brought with it our first look at PDCs, or point defense cannons. These little automated guns on certain ships act as a screen against small ships and, most importantly, missiles and torpedoes. As if the existing desync, bugs, and flares weren't enough, the only ships that are even worth using size 10 torpedoes against now have turrets that cannot even miss the torp. We've seen these PDCs on capital ships like the 890 Jump, Polaris, and the Idris. In fact, these have been so effective that when we took 3 Polarises to go fight the Idris as part of the Save Stanton mission, we were unable to land a single torpedo while actively targeting the Idris. So the very first mission that was implemented to show off the Polaris and demonstrate the value it brings to a fight did the exact opposite and showed us how weak those torpedoes are against an enemy like the Idris. After wasting around 15 to 20 size 10s overall, we swapped to just doing the cheesy method of dumbfiring the rockets at point-blank range against the Idris. Sure, that worked for now, but I'm sure the PDCs will eventually target all missiles that are on a collision course with the ship, and so I have no idea what the intention is for this kind of gameplay. At some point, CIG has mentioned that fighters are meant to kill the PDCs manually by targeting them, but we've also been told in the past that turrets are meant to be a screen against fighters, so I'm not sure which statement is supposed to be taken as truth here. Speaking of wasting 15 torpedoes, this brings us to the most recent changes to torpedoes in 4.0, the insane increase in the price. We're talking about a size 9 torpedo costing 300,000 to 400,000 aUEC, and the Polaris torpedoes costing $500,000 each. This would mean that the Polaris with 28 torpedoes would cost a total of $14 million for every single full restock. It's at that point that we got the next set of news that claiming your ship would no longer restock your torpedoes or missiles of any kind. Now on the ship like the Intrepid, this is not the end of the world. You just lose a couple thousand aUEC restocking those missiles. The Polaris, on the other hand, would cost a total of 14 million aUEC just to restock the torpedoes, let alone the other missiles. Of course, it's reasonable to think that 28 is more than enough, so why is this such an issue? The first is economy. The fact of the matter is, the Polaris is already starved of content. Save Stanton Phase 3 was specifically timed such that all the new and old Polaris owners would actually have an Idris to shoot at. Outside of that, how often do we even see them? We have the occasional global event, but the only consistent Idris we get is the Arlington mission at the very end of a large chain of missions. This may lead to a Polaris owner wanting to use it for more than just the Idris, like on ERTs for example. Unfortunately, the rewards for these missions are not nearly enough to cover the cost of even a single torpedo, let alone the higher fuel and repair costs. Now we've always known that capital ships, especially combat ones, are going to run at a loss. Chris Roberts has been clear that these ships are going to cost a lot of money to run, and will likely drain your resources, not add to them. I just don't know if our economy is ready for this level of loss. Until there is more to gain, even 100,000 aUEC loss per torpedo would add up very quickly, even assuming they were able to hit the enemy ship. The second reason this was such an issue is that unfortunately we are still playing in alpha. Forget the flares, chaff, desync, bugs, and every other issue that may cause you to waste a torp. You are just as likely to lose every single one of your torps all at once as you fall through the floor of your ship, or if your ship randomly explodes in the hangar. Without being able to reclaim your ship with torpedoes, one nasty bug is going to set you back millions every single time. With that being the case, even those who already own torpedoes would never feel safe bringing them out. You'd have to check your server FPS every time you got into an elevator or got up from a seat. The game just doesn't work well enough for this change to make sense right now. That feedback was heard loud and clear, and the change to insurance was reverted. It was stated that at some point it would return, and you will once again no longer be able to reclaim your ship to get torpedoes back, but until then, we have both the high prices and free torps. With this being the case, I do worry that the meta way to make a ton of money will just be to sell off all the torpedoes from your Polaris and then claim it again and rinse and repeat. I don't see a way around this other than to make it far less lucrative to sell size 10 torpedoes. The age-old adage goes, players will optimize the fun out of a game if you let them. This is exactly what I think will happen if people are left to their own devices with the current state of the game. Overall, I'm glad the change was reverted and that insurance will include the torpedoes, but with the high price, it does feel as though you are simply encouraging the insurance fraud. I don't think the game is ready for these kind of prices just yet, and we want to encourage people to try capital gameplay whenever possible to keep ironing out those bugs. I do eventually want to see those changes to insurance made, because I think it will add to the vibrant player economy, but I just don't think we're ready yet. So what do you think? Should insurance have changed? Should the prices have been increased this much? Let me know down below, and if you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.